Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our final session of 2021 Pittsburgh TechFest. So thanks for being here. We're really excited to have Joshua Sager here, who is from Viable. He will be presenting on tinkering a path for personal and professional growth. So if you do have any questions, please put it into the chat function in your dashboard. We'll take questions at the end of the presentation. And then without further ado, please welcome Joshua.
Hello. Hope everyone's had an awesome conference so far. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a great event. Thank you. I think this might be my third time speaking at TechFest, and it's always a great event. I'm really happy that I could be a part of it. So my name is Joshua Sager. If you're interested in reaching out to me for any reason, this is how you can get a hold of me. These are my social handles, and this is my email address. I work at a creative technology studio named Viable Industries. We design and build tools, systems, and software that focus on workflows, collaboration, data collection, visualization, that sort of thing. And we're located here in Pittsburgh. We've been around for about 8 years. If you have any questions beyond this presentation, I would love to talk to you. I think it would be great to continue those conversations. This is a way that you can get in contact with me. So, today, I'm going to talk about tinkering and why it means so much to me. My background has been pretty insane. It kind of looks like the road sign on the West End Bridge. I don't know if you're from Pittsburgh or you've gone across that bridge, but it's all over the place. And I bet you might be able to relate. It hasn't been a straight line. And oftentimes I reflect on where I've come from and what I've been able to do. And the question that I ask myself all the time is like, how is that possible? How did somebody that went to art school end up becoming a full stack engineer running a technology company as well as a real estate company? It doesn't seem like it's a straight line, as well as all sorts of other things. I was a semi-professional football player and all sorts of things like that. And my story, I think, is pretty similar to a lot of other people's stories, is that you get into it by starting with projects. You do one project and that project leads to another project. Maybe that leads to a job that leads to another project that leads to another. And along that way, you're working with people. And as you work with those people, the teams begin to grow or shrink, the teams begin to change. They go to different places. They take on different things. They experience different experiences, and they bring that into the projects, and the projects continue to change. Those relationships are built over time. And if you have good feelings with working with these people, then sometimes you hear from somebody that you haven't seen in 6, 7, or 8 years. You end up working on a project with them, which happens to me all the time. You get these out of the blue phone calls, and they have pretty crazy ideas for more projects. And over the past 22 years, as I've been working in technology, I've kind of grown up with these projects to take on more different responsibilities, anywhere from being a video production director, to editing, to graphic design, to full stack engineer, to all sorts of different things, depending on the need for that particular project. Especially when you work at a smaller organization, there aren't enough people to fulfill all those roles. So when I think about that, it can get pretty crazy. And especially when somebody comes to me with a project out of the blue, sometimes I have to think about it. And sometimes the project is crazy enough that I'll go ahead and I'll give it a try. And when that happens, more times than not, I end up getting stuck. There's some sort of brick wall that I run into, and the way that I solve that brick wall, the way that I get through on these projects that maybe I should have taken, maybe I shouldn't have taken, is tinkering. Tinkering is my way to grow through those tough moments. And so if we take a moment just to kind of analyze, well, what does that mean? What does that term mean? Well, it's defined as repairing, adjusting, or working with something in an unskilled or experimental manner. And that's very true for me. Oftentimes I start at the repair cycle and I work my way backwards as I learn more about the thing that I'm doing. And I gain more experience and knowledge, then I'm able to start from the creation process. So it's sort of a reverse engineering process for me. Now, it's hard and it's frustrating because you don't know what you don't know. And I think that there's an important element of this definition that I want to focus on, and that's the term unskilled. And if we sit with that term for just a minute, it can feel like it's an insult. It can feel like it's a slight or even hurtful, but it's not. If you unpack what it means to be unskilled, it means that you lack technical training. And I don't think that there's anything wrong or bad about that. It just means that you don't have the experience that maybe would lend a helping hand with the task that you have in front of you. So when I think about skill and I think about not being skilled and I think about acquiring skill, I think about 4 different things that kind of help me through the frustration of not being at the level that I want to be at that moment in time. And the first thing that I think about is something known as the Dreyfus model. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's the idea on somebody that's building skill and each level that they're at on the pyramid. And I wish I would have known about this when I was much younger, because it would have helped me curb some of the attitudes that I had around where I thought that I was or the kinds of opinions I had. And when you start off as a novice, you really cling to rules. You cling to them really hard. They're the only things that you know. They're the only truths. And like it's that way or nothing. And as you progress up the chain to an advanced beginner, you have a little bit of experience, but you kind of paint things with a broad brush. Everything looks pretty much the same. And then you get to a level where you start to cope with being an imposter. You know, we've been talking about imposter syndrome for it feels like 15 years at this point now. But when you get to this level, you start to see the routines that are happening, the patterns that are happening within your work, and you start to develop frameworks and shortcuts and things that allow you to do the work that you're doing faster, better. And then as you kind of get up to that proficiency stage, at that point, you've got a fair amount of experience at your hand, and you have the ability to kind of prioritize what's important and not what isn't important. Whereas somebody that's a couple ticks down, everything is like the highest level of importance. It's got to be this way or no way, and like, or it's going to like be bad, like whatever bad means, right? And then you work your way on up to the expert level. And at that moment, the rules, it's not that they don't apply, but they're so intuitive that on a moment-to-moment basis, you have an analytical approach to each one of those situations. And so when we think about all of those things and where we're at with a particular task, anywhere from baking bread all the way up to database connectivity, we're going to fall somewhere probably within this pyramid, within this triangle. So I think about that. And in tandem with that, I think about something that I heard on a podcast. It's called Back to Work. And it was something that Merlin Mann said. And Merlin Mann had a quote that I really liked that said that people who are effective solve the right problem at the right level with the right solution. And when we think about the pyramid, knowing where we're at here, you might not be at that expert level, but you might not always need that crazy high level solution in order to get through the moment that you're in right now. And I think that rings especially true with, you know, all of the crazy deadlines and things that we have going on any given day. The third thing I think about is I think about this concept called the state of flow. We have a chart here that's basically outlining, you have how challenging something is going up and down, and how much skill is required to do the thing going from left to right. And when I find myself in a state of flow, it's usually when I'm doing something that requires a high level of skill that I have that is relatively challenging. And when I find myself becoming upset or grumpy or anxious or apathetic or boredom, I think about this particular chart related to like, maybe the reason I feel that way is that I don't feel competent. Maybe I feel vulnerable. Maybe I'm not feeling like I know exactly what I need to know in order to do this. Or maybe it's a bad thought, but maybe I feel like it's beneath me for some reason. And when I think about those things, it can help me adjust my attitude or adjust my workflow or get some help in order to satisfy those kinds of things. The final thing that I think about is something that Ira Glass said. So I'm going to attempt to play a video. It may or may not work. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work because I can quote the best parts of it. So I'm going to fire it up here and I'm going to bring it over. We're going to try it out.
Nobody tells people who are beginners. And I really wish somebody had told this to me, is that all of us who do creative work, like, you know, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. But it's like there's a gap that for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good. Okay, it's not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer, and your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. And the thing I would just like say to you with all my heart is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste. They could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short. It didn't have this special thing that we wanted it to have. And the thing I would say to you is everybody goes through that. And for you to go through it, if you're going through it right now, if you're just getting out of that phase, you got to know it's totally normal. And the most important possible thing you could do is do a lot of work, do a huge volume of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month, you know you're going to finish one story. Because it's only by actually going through a volume of work that you're actually going to catch up and close that gap. And the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions. In my case, like I took longer to figure out how to do this than anybody I've ever met. It takes a while. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while, and you just have to fight your way through that. Okay?
Cool. All right. So I love that. So I think about these four things in tandem about my attitudes towards the work that I'm doing. I think about solving the right problem at the right level with the right solution. I think about where I'm at related to my skill level, like where I'm really at. And I think about making a lot of bad work for a long time until my skill level can match wherever my taste level is. And there are some things that I do professionally or personally where I don't know that I'll ever close that gap. And that's okay. It's an absolute okay thing. But I think about all these things in tandem because it helps me to continue to push forward. And so how does tinkering fit within all of this? Well, it can sound a bit dramatic, but there's typically a watershed moment that kind of like gets me kind of kicked off. I get knocked on my butt a little bit or knocked back a few pegs, and my insecurities are in full focus. My ego is crazy bruised, and I can typically trace that back to like a similar saying that I hear pretty often when I hit that moment. And it's somebody that says something like, "Oh, you didn't know that? I thought like you did this for a living." Like, and it's the like, that's like that part that like really like gets me at the very end. And maybe they mean well, maybe they don't. I have no idea. They're a jagoff, right? But like, it's in that moment where I'm like, this is what I'm supposed to do, and I don't know about it. Like, what the hell is happening right now? And like a whole crisis of confidence happens. And so I'm going to tell you a story about how something like that happened in my personal life. I live in on the outskirts of the city. I live in Westwood. It borders Green Tree, and we've got our house when we were fairly young. And I didn't know anything about it, about having a house or to do anything with the house. And I was so focused on my career. Every weekend, I was like reading computer manuals and trying to catch up for feeling like an imposter because I went to art school and I wanted to be a proper computer programmer. So that's where I spent all my time, is focusing on digital stuff. And then one day, my wife was in the office that's right across from where I'm at, and she takes the baseboard off the wall, and I'm horrified. I had never seen anything like this before. I had never seen exposed walls. I'd never seen paint, like multiple levels of paint. I could see through the floor. I thought our house was broken. I didn't know whether to call somebody to fix it or to sell it or to set it on fire. I had no idea. I was like really coming apart because this was a whole world I knew nothing about. And after I calmed down, my wife was knowledgeable in this area. We were able to kind of work on the project together, and we got it through. And it was a turning point, despite my vulnerabilities coming out in a very dramatic way. It turns out that moment changed my life. And since then, I have been very much into woodworking and carpentry. I've done electricity work in the house. I've refinished along with my wife, many, if not all of the rooms in our house, refinished the floors, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And what I love many things about my wife, but what I really like about her is that she continues to challenge me and my vulnerabilities. And during COVID, she said, I have an awesome idea, right? I want to build a house in our backyard. And I'm like, what? We already have a house that we live in. Why would you want to build a house? And she's like, I want to build a clubhouse for our daughter. And so knowing nothing, we didn't buy any plans. We didn't do anything. We just like dug some holes, built a platform, bought some wood, cut a lot of that wood, and just started framing stuff up. And we put sort of a roof on it and a slide. And then we put like a roof on it. And then we like shingled it. And then, you know, Scooby-Doo transition into, and it's even more done than this now, but like we basically built a house with drip edge and the whole deal. And I was freaking out the entire way, but we were able to do little tests like of tinkering with like, how do you think it works to like make a roof? Or like, how do you think this could go together? We built small scale models. We did a lot of drawings. We had sometimes heated debates about what we thought we knew until we actually did it. And then it was normally me that conceded on whatever the thing was. And what helped us get through the whole thing was these little checks along the way of trying and testing and making our way through, that at the very end, we now have a whole section of people in our life that think that we are construction workers, which we are absolutely not. But this thing, you can park a car on it. It's pretty freaking awesome, I have to say. So back to tinkering, one thing that I think we need to think about, or I like to think about, that's been hard as I've gotten older, is that it is okay to be a novice. When I was younger, I didn't know a whole lot. I was a novice at everything. And so whether or not I had success or not, I didn't even have a whole lot of success to pull from. But once I started to get success, I didn't want to lose it. I didn't like feeling dumb. I didn't like feeling like I didn't understand. And so I would like hold on to just the things that I knew about and just live there. And I urge everyone that it's okay to be a novice in something, whether it's a new programming language, whether it's a new framework, or whether it's baking bread. Like I think that's totally okay. What I manage is my fear that I'm going to run into something that I don't know, and then someone will see me fumbling with the thing that I don't know about, and it will confirm that I'm an imposter. That's the thing that drives me and that I run from. And as a result of that, I've put together a framework that pretty much works like this. There's a spark that gets things going. There's a lot of research. There's an element of play and an element of reflection, and there are a couple of repeaters that are inside of this loop. And then I'll talk more about what each of these things are. So the spark is where we start, and the spark is a spot where sometimes I'm knocked on my butt, or sometimes I'm feeling stuck. Sometimes I'm feeling stunted or held back, or I'm bored, or maybe I'm in awe of something, or maybe I'm envious of something else. But there's a moment where there's like something there that I desire because it's lacking in what's going on. And there was a moment that happened to me that changed the trajectory of my professional career, that happened back in 2008. And that's when I met Golan Levin. And he is a professor at CMU. He is kind of dubbed as a creative coder, which is like writing programs for the humanities, like arts, expression, giving back, like that sort of thing. And so this was at a conference a long time ago for a technology that does not exist anymore. It was called FlashPit 08. And he was the keynote speaker, and there he was talking about these environments he created. He turned like physical places into playgrounds. He was mixing performance art and technology. He had these audio-visual experiences and experiments where the user was the conductor of the experience, and it was unlike anything I had ever seen before. And these were all built way before the Kinect, and many of them way before the iPhone. He was creating motion and touch experiences that seemed like magic before those frameworks even like really existed. And one of the things that really got me is that he did a cell phone orchestra where he set a bunch of people that had this kind of phone and this kind of phone and this kind of phone in an audience. The audience gave up their telephone number, and they had a computer program ring everyone's phone like it was an orchestra. It was really insane. And I need to preface this by like, he did this in 2001, and this is what the phone looked like back in 2001. This was an incredible thing. It blew my mind, you know. Here I was waiting for new features to come out in software before I could feel like I could be creative. You know, a CRT monitor 12 years ago. And here was somebody that was making software, making tools, and making experiences unlike anything I had ever really seen in the real world. There's no like facial recognition plugin in Photoshop. Like maybe that will happen someday. Maybe it's there now and I don't know about it. But this was somebody that was messing around with all this stuff like a long time ago. On that same day, at that same conference, I met this man, Ian Coyle. You might know him as Nike Better World. He's the guy that made the parallax scrolling thing that then everybody did for years and years and years and years and years. Well, I became friends with him. And one of the things that he said at the conference that day was that passion projects are the things that move his career forward. So along with all of that, I was on fire. And I went home and I started working on some passion projects. I created this MIDI sequencer that used Flash and Java to create animations and make experimental visuals on the screen. And then I started to tell people about it. And then I started to get invited to user groups and local events. And then I got invited to speak at that same conference the very next year. And then I got invited to speak in Minneapolis and Portland and all sorts of stuff. And I was just like a rando that was attending the conference the year before. But I started tinkering and sharing and playing and experimenting with this stuff that I was completely captured by. And then all of a sudden it propelled me forward. It changed some of the jobs that I was doing. It was pretty crazy. And I've got an amazing secret about it. This thing that I made, it had bugs everywhere. It was broken all over the place. But the people that I was interacting with, they didn't care so much about that. They were interested in my thought processes. They were interested in my process in general. And they were really curious about the story on how I was able to get all that stuff together. So that's an example of like a spark that like lit a fire under my butt a little bit. The next phase that I'd like to talk about is research. And in this moment, that's when the curious mind is at work, and I seek out a lot of information as much as I can. And I hunt for things to read and things to watch and things to participate in. And at this point, I'm just super hungry. I'm trying to soak all that stuff in, but it can be very difficult to determine what the good stuff is and what the bad stuff is. And I have a couple of hacks for that. What I have been able to determine is that there are people to follow, and those people follow other people, and those people follow other people, kind of like bands that are inspired by other people. Like, what band is your favorite band like? And if you follow the chain up far enough, you're going to find that there are some very commonalities between what the people are looking at and who they are inspired by. And there are some things you might find, like in the world of woodworking, if you're trying to like learn how to do dovetails or whatever, you might get somebody that says like, I don't know, I just like do it this way and it's like super cool, right? Well, but then there's somebody else that's like, oh, I am very inspired by Moxon, who did this back in like, I don't know, like the 1500s or whatever. And then somebody else starts talking about the same kind of thing and the same kind of thing. And you can point it back to like, oh, well, maybe I should go check out who this Moxon person is. Maybe there's something to that. That's one way to kind of fast track in and find what the good stuff is. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to, build up what those commonalities are, but that's helped me out a whole lot. So whoever I think is doing cool work, I want to find out who inspires them and then up the chain as far as I can go. Then I start to put together plans. I have this blue notebook. It's like sitting behind me right now, where I put together all of the things that I intend to do. And I also record the things that I've done previously and my learnings and my failings. Like it's kind of like my life blood. If I were to lose that in a fire, I'd be totally bummed. So I make a plan, but sometimes it can be hard to make a plan. And so what I would suggest, and this is what I do even with my professional work every day, I'm brought stuff nearly daily where someone's like, we got to make this thing happen. And the first thing is like, I'm too busy, or I don't know, like it's a bad idea. Like there's all these reasons not to do it. But then I calm down and I ask myself like, but if I had to do just like one thing on it, what would that thing, like if we really had to make it work today, like it was like super important, like what would it be? And then like, what would that success look like? Maybe it wouldn't be the whole thing, but just like one little part of it. Like, what would that be? And then eventually I start to think about things like the ROI, like, okay, if I'm going to continue to do this, am I prepared to do it? Do I have time? Am I willing to make time? Can I toe dip? And in this moment, I have some internal characters that look a lot like the guys from the Muppets that are like start throwing stuff at me all over the place. And they say things like, hey, that's been done before. Why would you ever want to do that? Like, how is the thing you're going to do different? And my answer to that, if I can come out of that cloud, is that it doesn't have to be different. It's different because it's my experience. It's different because I'm understanding it. And maybe it's something that will light the world on fire, or probably it won't. And that's okay, because I'm learning how to do something. I'm gaining a skill. I'm gaining an experience. It's a moment where I'm bettering myself and I'm going through growth. And so how I evaluate whether or not I continue on with something is it's a scale. And it's my desire to know and experience something versus my feeling of insecurity and vulnerability. If I'm feeling too insecure and too vulnerable about it, like that I think it's going to cause harm, or that it'll cause harm to myself, then I probably am not going to do it. But I have a puzzle-like mind that I'm very curious on solving a lot of things. So sometimes I need to know. Sometimes I don't need to know. I get far enough, I'm like, that's good. We are good to go. We can move on from here. But other times I'm like, well, I'm just going to try one more thing, just see. And after that, maybe just like one more thing and we'll try there. And that helps me like inch forward a little bit, which leads me into the next two, which kind of work in tandem. It's the play and the reflection period of this framework. And so if we start at play, I usually start off with a quick win. Like, hello world, I think is exactly what that is. Like something that I can get like real fast, like, haha, look at this. I'm an app developer. It says hello world, right? And then I start to move forward. Yeah, exactly, right? And then I hit a wall and I'm like, well, that didn't really work, but that's okay. And then I nudge a little bit further and then like, okay, it looks like this isn't happening. I'm going to have to get some more information, or I'm going to have to talk to a human, take a class or something to kind of progress forward what it is that I'm trying to do, right? And I ask myself, did I meet the goal? If not, what do I have to do next? And that can help to like right the ship a little bit so I can get back at the play. And reflection is a big part of that. So when I'm reflecting, I use the classics, and the classics here is the scientific method. Make an observation, ask your question, form your hypothesis, make a prediction, test it, and iterate on how you're going. And I think that we probably all do this. Maybe we knew about this method formally, maybe we didn't, but that's a pretty standard model to follow. You have an idea about something, you make something, and you find out that you were wrong, and then you make an adjustment to it, and you find out that you're still wrong, and you keep going until you get something that you're satisfied with. It's a pretty common model. For me, if I were to illustrate this, it kind of looks like a Zelda board. And if a Zelda board was matched with the movie The Groundhog Day. So I start in one place that I think I know, and I usually don't, but I think I know. And then I like get information and I try something and I adventure off to another spot. And then that dark place comes into light. And then I try something else and I move on to another spot. And I'm reading, I'm having conversations with actual people. I'm trying to be in the same room with other experts so they can show me stuff, because reading it for me and experiencing it in the flesh are completely different things. I do more, I learn more, and then more things come into focus. And then more things appear, and then I make mistakes. And sometimes I realize in my Groundhog Day path that I messed that up and I have to start back over from another spot, a safe point, and work my way back forward. And I tweak by tweak, I work myself out until I fill out my Swiss cheese board of knowledge and I satisfy whatever my original goal was, whatever that thing was that I set out to do, which probably wasn't to amass knowledge and everything, but it was probably to achieve a particular task. Did I meet my goal? If not, try again, right? So maybe I never get beyond the first square. That has happened with a lot of stuff where I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? And then I'll hop into it and I'm like, nope. And then I like hop off to something else, right? And that's okay too. So as far as the framework goes, that's pretty much it. And the component that I think that is really important is to share your work along the way. Share something that you're interested in with your friends or family or coworkers or people that are into that, or even on social media. Share the research you're doing, share the experiments you're creating, share your reflections, because some crazy things start to happen. Years ago, I was really into Arduinos and Raspberry Pis and all sorts of stuff like that. And I happened to be teaching at that same time at a technical school. And I was just talking about it. And my students were like, well, what's all this all about? Can we try that? I'm like, well, sure, if you're interested. So we started like a little club and we started to build things. And what we built out was a little Dance Dance Revolution Simon kind of game. And we were out in the hallway and people were curious about what we were doing, and we would let people interact with it. And we tried things and they worked, and other ththings they didn't. And then the administration found out about it and they're like, well, this seems like it's really cool. And then they gave us a budget to build 2 100-inch glass touch and motion screens on either side of each wing of the school. And we baked that stuff into the classroom, and we started making all kinds of like wild and crazy experiments. So as you like wayfind it through the school, you would see all this like super cool stuff. And it got so popular that some of the computer science kids, when we started making this in the class that I taught, it was like user interaction for the web, basically. The computer science kids got really jealous and they started auditing my classes. And then it got real cool, I have to say. It was awesome. So my takeaway there is that you don't have to wait around for an idea that's good enough for you to work on it. You can start on it today. Like the things that I were doing initially, I didn't know that that's where that was going to end up. It was just like one little thing that I was doing that led to something else, that led to something else, that led to something else. And I was talking about it and excited about it. And then somebody else was like, well, what if you did that? And I'm like, I don't know. I never thought about it like that. And it just started to build. And the other thing that I would like to do is that take a moment to say is that you don't have to quit your job in order to change your situation or your satisfaction. Sometimes you do. But I have another story where I changed my job situation where I didn't have to quit. And I think we're in this moment in time where there's so many opportunities that it can feel very knee-jerk reaction to be like, nope, I'm out. I'm going to go someplace else and it's going to be just fine. Well, I kind of figured out that I'm not interviewing for my perfect job. I'm kind of creating what that is. And that's not possible everywhere, but it's possible at more places than you think. I started off as just like an instructor at the school, and I ended up being like creating motion experiences the way that Golan did, and it was like pretty awesome. Well, another story. This is hilarious. I was working at a medical technology company, and I was bored. I was like a senior level member of the team, and I was not liking my job because they didn't give me anything to work on. And I would ask my boss about it. I'm like, hey, can you give me something to work on? And they're like, we don't want to waste your time. You're like really smart. And I'm like, I'm not really smart. And I would like to do something to contribute to the company. And they're like, I don't know. Why don't you like research something? And so after a while, I just started walking around the building and meeting people and asking them what they were working on. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. Do you need any help with that? And then I started helping them out. And then some more things came my way and I helped more people out, and some crazy stuff happened where I started to get recognized as like a go-getter for showing initiative. Like meanwhile, I had nothing on my plate. They were like paying me a fairly fair salary, and I started basically freelancing inside of the company that I worked at. And it was awesome. I got to work on some really, really cool stuff. And despite the fact that my job description said one thing, I was doing something completely different. Which leads me to a couple of final thoughts here. I have some opinions about job descriptions. I think that they are more like a syllabus than anything else, or at least they can be. And what I mean by that is that I'm not really interested at this point in taking on a new job that does everything that I'm doing already, and I'm just changing a logo. What I'm really interested in is looking at something and saying like, okay, I know about that. I know about that. Ooh, that's pretty cool. I've heard about that. Like that thing over there, I have no idea what that is, but I'm curious about it. That, nope, I'm no good for that. But like these other things I can do, plus all this other experience that I have in doing all this other stuff. I haven't gotten everything that I've gone for, but I've gotten a lot of the things that I've gone for when I started to approach jobs as more like something that I want to grow into rather than I have to have everything there. And I think some people might be 60, 70, or 80% there on the list, and they don't apply for it because they think that they have to be 100% there. So I would encourage you, Like if they want to take the interview, that's on their end. It's their job to kind of screen you out. So kind of getting back into tinkering, if you want to get started or keep it going, that can be difficult. And I have some advice about that. Doing habit sharing can be very effective. Habit sharing is the idea on doing something that you normally do on a very routine schedule, but taking along something else that you don't normally do along for the ride. One of the things I have to do for running my business is that I have to deal with physical mail, and I don't like to do it, and it's something that piles up. So I started habit sharing. Every time I do a pull request, which is a lot with the kind of work that we do all the time, I have to satisfy at least one piece of mail. And sometimes the tests take a while to build or whatever, so I satisfy 2 or 3 pieces of mail. And throughout any given week, because I get a substantial amount of mail, which seems ridiculous, but I do, that problem has no longer become a problem. And that can be very similar with acquiring a new skill. Like maybe it's something that you do at the beginning of the day, the end of the day, the middle of the day, or whatever. I'm a big fan of rituals. I think rituals can help you get through that hump, because it's fun in the beginning when it's exciting, but when you get frustrated and it sucks, that's when the rituals and the habit sharing can really help. Accountability can help as well. And when you're sharing things with people, accountability kind of starts, because the next time you see your buddies or your friends or your family or colleagues, they might ask you like, hey, how's that IoT project that you're working on that you were talking about before? And you'll have to tell them either like you did something or like, I stopped. I'm like, well, why'd you stop? And there's some level of accountability. There are also groups that you can join. I'm a part of a business accountability group that I really like. It kind of holds our feet to the fire for all of our monthly and quarterly goals. And I think most importantly, wholesale changes to your schedule or to your life can be difficult to maintain, but doing one small tweak every week is something that you can have a lot of success with over a long period of time, instead of like, all right, tomorrow I'm just gonna change everything and I'm gonna be an app developer, and so I'm just gonna do 40 hours of that. Like that might not be realistic. But what if you just opened up Xcode or Android Studio and you just did one thing, and like that's cool. And normally when you do one thing, that leads to another, that leads to another, that leads to another. Cool. So now on to some of my final thoughts. I've got 10 of them. I have more, but I just put 10 here. Being a novice is okay. Vulnerability is a window into growth. Don't wait for opportunities, make them. You're probably doing awesome stuff, and maybe people know about it and maybe they don't. And waiting around for somebody to see the awesome person that you are or the great thing that you're doing might take way too long. You can make your opportunities by sharing the stuff that you're doing with people and getting involved in communities where other people are making something similar. Follow your curiosities. Sometimes it's a short road, sometimes it's a long road, sometimes it's a super long winding road that keeps coming back with different chapters and pauses in between. That sounds more like my life. Expand your community and make friends with experts in real life. Like online is super cool, and that's probably the way we need to be probably right now. But whenever you can get out and being in the same room with people that do this stuff, it's amazing the stuff that you can pick up on just randomly. Seeing them sketch something, seeing them take a note, or even just seeing what software that they have on their computer. Or if you're into woodworking, like or baking or stitching or whatever, like seeing it in up and close and personal, you can learn a whole lot in between the lines there. Don't wait around for an idea that's worth your time. There's probably something cool that you want to do. I would say make steps towards that today. Set a deadline to share something by the end of the month. You don't have to quit your job to advance your career or to improve your life satisfaction. There are opportunities that might exist within the organization that you're in, especially if you're at a larger organization. You might be able to transition into a different role or take on some additional things that could be offered to you. Don't interview for your dream job. Create it, and you can create it by making awesome stuff and sharing it, and those opportunities will start to come at you. Think about a job description as a syllabus. And then 2 more. I got stuck at work I followed my curiosities. I shared my work and my thoughts, and opportunities started to present themselves, and my work as well as my life changed. And my final thought is to make stuff, share it, share all of it, even the mistakes, because there's good stuff where all that is concerned. Your learnings are just as important as your successes. Failures are also an important thing. That's pretty much what I have to say. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. If you have any questions, we can field them now. If you want to talk shop, I'd love to share a beverage with you sometime if that's something that you're into.
Thank you so much. So any questions? I see we have lots of great comments in here in the chat function, but if you have any questions, please enter them here, or you can unmute yourself and ask them. We can make it more interactive. We have a couple minutes. We have about 10 or 20 minutes if anyone wants to continue the conversation.
Oh, cool. So I'm just looking at the chat now. So someone dropped in the Ira Glass. Yeah, what a jack, right?
Oh, we have a question. What books and or podcasts would you recommend in helping others along this journey of yours?
There are lots of different resources that I read and that I listen to, and it depends on the different point in time where I'm at. Right now, I'm listening to a lot of the Dax Shepard Armchair podcast. There's a lot of stuff about mental health on there that I think is pretty fabulous. I listen to the Back to Work podcast a lot. It's very tech heavy, and some of the technology, if you go back to the beginning, is where like the really good workflow stuff is, but some of the technology there is a bit obsolete. But I really like that one. I am reading for fun right now. I just finished We Are the Wildcats by a local author, Siobhan Vivian. It's an amazing story. I don't know that helps here, but those are some of the things that off the top of my head, I think I'd have to think about that a little bit more.
Great. More comments coming in as well, which is great. I love it. If you want to unmute, feel free.
I loved the part you mentioned about when you were approaching something as a novice for the first time and not liking the feeling of being a novice at it because you had gotten so used to being good at everything you did. And that was something that I shared a lot with going through programming boot camp, because I did plumbing for a lot of years and I got really comfortable being really good at plumbing, and approaching a field where there's no real such thing as an expert in it is wild. Like, because in plumbing, it's easy to become an expert in it, in my opinion. Or at least it was for me. And in programming, I found a lot of stuff analogous to building a house, but nothing quite as much as when the frameworks came in. Yeah. I'm sorry, I kind of trailed off.
No, I feel you there. And I think that that probably shows itself more in my pursuit as a musician than anywhere else. I end up, for a long time, I was playing the same songs and the same scales over and over and over and over again because I wasn't comfortable enough like doing the stuff that I sucked at, because I didn't have a lot of time to play the guitar. So I just wanted to play the stuff that sounded good. But once I came to terms with that, it allowed me to kind of to grow.
It sounds like your process is very similar to the OODA loop, OODA, observe, orient, decide, act, the loop that was described by an Air Force colonel about how quickly you can, how tight you can make your OODA loop makes you the most nimble and agile and effective pilot. And it sounds like it's very similar to what you do with your stuff of like just kind of, following this loop and just, deciding on how this went. Here's an experiment, here's how it went, and I need to adjust these things. It sounds very similar. I didn't know if you knew about the OODA loop or if anyone else did.
No, I don't, but I will definitely look it up. Mostly, I've just failed a whole lot. And I think because I spent 11 years as an educator trying to help people get a job that I previously came from, I tried really hard to think about like what sucked super hard for me that I can make suck less for them. And I was successful in some ways, but in other ways, you just have to experience things for yourself. You just have to.
Pain is a great instructor.
Right? Like you got to burn your hand a couple times, man. You just do.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And then also, I would want to say that I think the journey of learning and failing, if you could like pause and just reflect on it as you're doing it and understand, you know, the situation that you're in, it makes it more bearable and also, you know, even enjoyable. Like I'm new to the field and I'm lucky to work with a really good company that's, you know, very patient with me and takes the time to explain things. And I was speaking with my significant other about it. I was like, I wish I could just fast forward a year because I know where I'm going and, you know, where I'm headed. You know, it's just sometimes I wish I could go, you know, a year into the future and be, you know, as knowledgeable as I want to be. But I was like, well, this is part of the journey. So at the same time, not to beat myself up too much as I'm going through it. It's a very humbling experience, I think, learning something new. And so I think that's also really good for character development that shows you can go through that, but also it can humble you and make you really appreciate you know, the journey and what you're learning and what you're doing.
You are so spot on. That is something that I struggle with constantly. And there's this Adam Sandler movie called Click. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's like that particular concept where, you know, I wish I could go forward. And now that I'm older, I do have some perspectives on being able to look backwards. And the developer that I am now, I would have killed somebody to know the things that I know today 6 years ago. And sometimes I have to take stock because I never get to where I want to be. Like even today, I'm like, oh man, I need to know all this stuff. Like I can't wait until I have all that like under my belt, and then I'm gonna be there. But like you're never really there. Like you're always moving and progressing, especially in a field like the one that we're in, where the technologies are changing all the time. So you're right. Being able to take stock and say like 6 months ago, me would be like saying how dope I am for being able to do the kind of stuff that I'm doing. So that's a good call.
Yeah, I had that experience. I was able to learn a new language at one point living in a country in Asia, and you know, and then not being able to speak the language and just doing simple things that, you know, I take for granted, like having this conversation or expressing myself at a store and just buying a pack of gum, and then not being able to do that for like 6, 7, 8 months, you know, and just feeling like a child, you know, so you're learning. So yeah, so then when you get past that point, you know, just buying a pack of gum or a trash bag, like you appreciate that little thing so much more.
And then you take it for granted because you're like, all right, I want to buy a car.
Right. Right.
Yeah. That's true. Steven says when the flag on the golf course moves all the time, it's difficult to keep stock on how well you're hitting the ball. That's true. And I think the only comment that I have about that is that if you kind of know in the moment a measurable that you're after, at least you know that you're hitting those things. I saw something about anxiety a while ago about there's something that I do when I'm trying to solve anxiety in my own life. There's the equation of trying to get more knowledge, and then there's the equation of coping with what's going on. And I've always been on the side of if I just know more and I can get more information, then I'm going to feel better about it because I will feel mentally prepared for all of the things that are going to happen. But the reality is that I'm never going to know all the scenarios, and that sometimes being able to kind of cope with the unknown is a necessary part of the whole equation to allow you to, you know, have a good mental health space to continue to move forward and to continue to want to make progress in that particular area. So I don't know, it was something that stuck with me that I heard recently.
I was also going to mention.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think something else that goes into the fear of being a novice at it is when you come up and all of a sudden realize you're good at something. A lot of times you never gave yourself credit for every little victory that you got along the way. And because of that, you don't know how to anymore, and you need to give yourself credit when you do something new and get it right, even if there's no one else there to give it to you.
Yeah, I think postmortems are the way to do that. At the end of projects, that's a good moment to kind of take stock.
Postmortems.
Yeah, it's basically like, here's the end of a project. How did the project go? Was it good? Was it bad? Were we on budget? Were we not on budget? What did we learn? What did we not know? What were the unknowns that we uncovered? And is there anything that we can do next time that can make this process less painful?
Great. Any other questions? It's 11:50 now. If there are no more questions, we'll be able to wrap up. Make sure to check out the sponsors for the event. Here's a link in the chat. Several of them have prizes, so enter to win some prizes from them. And we are going to be sending out an exit survey, so please make sure to fill that out. That really helps us when we're developing the program. So hopefully in 2022, we will be back together in person. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you there. So any final remarks anyone wants to say before we close out? Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Joshua, for being here. And have a great weekend, everyone.
Take it easy.
All right, we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.